You've seen the image. The dark, elegant armor, the unshakable stance, the gleam of the katana, a blade that was more than metal. It was an extension of the soul. The samurai. To the West, and let's be honest, even to modern Japan, he is the epitome of virtue. Unbreakable honor, absolute loyalty, and a code of conduct that turned every warrior into a walking philosopher. He is the hero who never hesitates to commit seppuku, ritual suicide, in the name of dignity. A man who traded life for glory. But what if I told you that the noblest thing about the samurai was that he was actually very good at marketing? The samurai we all adore, the Hollywood and manga hero, never truly existed. And the code that made him famous? Well, it was invented. To understand why the samurai was wrong, we need to go back to his golden age, or more precisely, his age of mud and blood. The Sengoku period, the 15th and 16th centuries. A time of total civil war, when rival lords, the daimyo, fought for control over a fragmented Japan. Here, the samurai was not a romantic medieval knight. He was an expensive, highly trained mercenary. Loyalty was a luxury, often exchanged for land or rice. Betrayal wasn't a moral failure. It was a perfectly valid war tactic. What mattered wasn't the purity of your heart, but the sharpness of your blade, and more importantly, the size of your payment. The Bushido that celebrates an honorable death in battle. In reality, most of them were far more concerned with surviving to collect their next paycheck. The real plot twist is this. The Bushido Code, the way of the warrior. As we know it, that little pamphlet of honor and noble death was largely codified after the need for these professional warriors began to disappear. In the 17th century, under the peaceful Tokugawa era, Japan was finally unified. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of samurai became a social class without a purpose. A professional army in peacetime is an expensive and dangerous problem. So what do you do with all these armed, violent, and now bored men? You give them an instruction manual. Bushido, popularized by figures like Yamaga Soko, was essentially a tool of social control. It was a doctrine that justified their privileges while forcing them to become good bureaucrats, loyal, obedient, and, crucially, willing to die for their newfound uselessness. Where the myth fails spectacularly is in economics. In times of peace, the ability to decapitate an enemy is far less useful than the ability to calculate taxes. The samurai became public administrators. They remained at the top of the social pyramid, but lived in misery. They were paid in rice, and with inflation and economic change, their noble status was often a financial joke. They were the only social class that, out of honor, was forbidden to engage in trade or agriculture. In practice, many became bureaucratic parasites, dependent on ever-shrinking stipends. The image is not of an elegant duelist, but of a starving, desperate civil servant clinging to his sword as a hollow symbol of a past that would never return. This crisis gave rise to the saddest and, paradoxically, most romanticized byproduct of the class: the ronin, the masterless samurai. The ronin wasn't a lone wanderer seeking justice. He was an unemployed, dangerous man. Thousands of individuals trained in violence, left without purpose or means of survival. They became bandits, poorly paid martial arts instructors, or simply wandered until they starved to death. The ronin is proof that loyalty was a two-way street, and when the system failed to provide a master and a paycheck, the code of honor dissolved faster than ink in the rain. Where was Bushido when it came to feeding one's family? It was nowhere to be found. The final blow didn't come from an external enemy. It came from progress. By the mid-19th century, Japan was forced to open itself to the West and quickly realized that the military technology of an industrialized world made the katana about as useful as a can opener. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 marked the formal death of the samurai class. The new ruling elite, ironically, composed largely of forward-thinking former samurai, understood that Japan needed a modern national army, trained and equipped with rifles. In 1876, the ban on wearing swords in public was the final nail in the coffin. The samurai, clinging to their past, fought for their survival in the Satsuma Rebellion, led by the iconic Saigo Takamori. The greatest irony? They were slaughtered by the Imperial Army, a force of conscripted soldiers wearing Western-style uniforms, armed with rifles and artillery. It was the katana versus progress, and progress always wins. So, if the class was extinguished ignobly, and was, for the most part, a collection of underpaid bureaucrats and treacherous mercenaries, why does the myth persist? Because history, my friends, is always written by the living, and often for very cynical purposes. Modern Japan needed a founding myth to unite the nation during its imperialist era. The image of the honorable samurai was resurrected and turned into nationalist propaganda, a symbol of discipline and obedience. Then the West bought it wholesale. Seven Samurai, The Last Samurai, the romanticization of a code that was never universal and was often hypocritical. It's the perfect example of how a narrative is more powerful than reality. Nobility, honor, the code, all of it are useful inventions. The samurai's mistake wasn't wielding the sword, but believing that a code, a class, or even a weapon could be immune to time, the economy, and above all, politics. The samurai were wrong because they clung to an ideal of honor while the world moved toward money, pragmatism, and industrial steel. They became a cultural icon only after being defeated by progress. That's our final lesson. Behind every legendary hero, you'll probably find a rice-stained bureaucrat and a mandatory human resources manual. The sword may be romantic, but the one who really wins the war is the man who controls the budget. But that's just my opinion. If you enjoyed it, help us out by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. This is The Dualism.